Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws Podcast with East Forest. I am Mr. Forest, back in the saddle after doing some traveling and touring to Europe and the United States. Definitely a little exhausted, but glad to be back before we head out to Esalen this weekend. Rod and I are going to be doing a retreat out there. Some of you have asked when the next retreat at Esalen is. It's in December, and usually the signups for that are about 3 months before. So if you want to know, get on the East Forest newsletter mailing list, and we'll let you know when that goes live. We'd like to have it go to our community first. But if you want to know first, join the Patreon at any level, patreon.com/eastforest. That is where we share things like that, as well as demos and do our monthly Zoom council. I want to thank Jaspin, Mary, I think it's Anki or Anki-wan, and Shelby for joining recently on the Patreon. We are happy to have you there, and we love the support. And so thank you to everyone on our council on Patreon. Today I have an episode with Christopher Shinn. Christopher is someone I've known for a very long time, since my early days in New York City. He's a very talented, gifted, award-winning playwright and writer, and very insightful gentleman who's done some deep dives into the world of psychology. He's just a deep thinker and insightful, and we always love to connect. And I think we're seeing some cracks in Christopher, his views about the unseen, and so we get into that a little bit. And I always like having a variety of voices for myself too, to kind of look at things from different angles. So as always, you're going to love this conversation. As one of the things we did on this tour was we were at the Psychedelic Science Conference in Denver. And before that, I was in Ireland and Iceland, and then we ended in Los Angeles. And so I'll just give you a quick overview. Maybe I'll do an episode with Rada, because there was so much that happened that was really beautiful and lots to talk about. I want to say thank you to everyone in Iceland. That was super magical, doing that show, intimate and just deep. I had a really deep, beautiful experience being there for the White Nights. And Ireland at Beyond the Pale, great to go back. Everyone in Ireland, Peter Broderick and I are going to be playing there this August. And please get a ticket, because we want to sell it out, and we want to let everyone who's interested in going the opportunity to go. That'll be on August 12th. And August 13th, we're aiming to be in London at Islington Assembly Hall, also with Peter Broderick. These joint shows are going to be incredible. Please help share those shows and tell your friends to get a ticket early if they can, because that means a lot to the promoters and feeling like we're going to have some great shows. So that's coming up. What else do we have coming up? The Ram Dass Legacy Retreat in Boone, North Carolina at the end of August, and Dreamersland in Poland in early August. That's in Polana, Poland. So going back to Europe in August, which is hard to think about at this moment in time because we just got back, but looking forward to connecting with our community out there. And then we went over to the Psychedelic Science Conference, which I want to do an episode on that in itself because it was so wild. There's like 12,000 people. I'd never seen so many psychedelic-oriented people in one place, unless you count Burning Man, but for a conference at least. And yeah, I want to go. Actually, I do want to do an episode on that because there's so much to talk about. We played a show that was put on by Propeller. It was called Portal, and it was a challenging show because of the hail and the weather, and they lost their venue, and then not everyone could get in. And I just want to apologize and say I feel for you, and I really feel bad for the way the structure of that event went down, and the sound. I wanted it to be a bit better. I always aim for the best experience, and I always advocate for our community in these shows. And I was there at 1 p.m. fighting to get it everything we could to make it a better and better experience. I didn't leave until past 3 a.m. to get out of there. But it was hard for me too. I just want to say that. And I want to thank for the people who did show up. And if you bought a ticket and you couldn't get in, let us know. Team@eastforest.org. We'll do whatever we can on our side to try and keep that in mind and make it up somehow. But you can also always reach out to the Propeller.la team and let them know as well. But just for myself as an artist who was hired to do that event, it was crazy. Bonobo couldn't even land because the weather was so crazy, so he never even made it. And the rain and hail was so loud. We were on a top floor that it was louder than the music. I mean, I've never played a show like that. It was just a lot of energy. So a lot of brave souls who were involved in that. And my heart goes out to anyone who's outside in that crazy weather. That was just nuts. And it was a wild experience for me, too. But I went out to LA after that and played with the Reflections team in Pasadena. And that was just beautiful. So thank you to everyone who came out in Los Angeles. I so look forward to coming back and doing more things like that. But yeah, we'll give you an episode that gives you more stories behind the scenes on all of that. And I just want to dive into this conversation because it's a good one, and I love talking to old friends, and there's no one finer than Christopher Shinn. What's up, Christopher Shinn? Nice to see you again. Actually, the other times we did this, we did not use video.
Yes.
So I actually haven't seen you in a long time.
Yeah.
You look good.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm hanging in there. Last time you were doing video, but I had just moved in here and I was ashamed.
Yeah,
It wasn't put together. It wasn't put together, and I shocked you. You were expecting full video, and I was like, no.
Well, and the first time, I don't think I was doing video, so I'm just recognizing that, like, this is the first. So, yeah. Nice to see you.
Good to see you. This is our fourth time.
Well, we've never done video. You've somehow skirted the system all this time. So you're in New York, and hopefully when people hear this, it's not smoky, but I know it's been pretty intense there. That happens out here a lot on the West Coast and the mountain states. It's horrible when that happens. It just ruins everything.
Yeah, we're not used to it. I mean, I guess I'm reading that we may be getting used to it. It definitely evoked memories of after 9/11, and just understanding something's in the sky that you're not used to seeing. I mean, it was all fine. I think it's one of these things that on one level it's fine and manageable, but on some deeper level it's very surreal, and people have a difficulty finding language to describe how it's making them feel. It's just been an interesting couple of days.
Is it so bad that it changes the color of the sky? I've seen pictures. It's kind of like it's that orange reddy look, or is it just smoky?
Yesterday was very orange. It was smoky, and then it became very orange midday, and it was very surreal. I mean, I felt fine. I was like going about my day, but then I felt on some deeper level, it actually was very destabilizing, and everybody was texting everybody, and it was a really interesting moment. And somebody I know felt really guilty, thinking, well, there's people in war zones, and I shouldn't be concerned about relatively minor issue with the air. But I was like, no, I think it destabilizes something deep, and that's worth exploring.
I think it's pretty powerful. I mean, when the actual air around you feels toxic, or it's very apocalyptic feeling when something like that, because it feels way out of your control. You're just like, okay, this is far beyond an economic thing or something unseen. It becomes not just the scene, but it's like the water the fish is going through has been polluted, and you're just like, there's nowhere to go. Or I guess you can feel like you can stay inside, but even then it's pretty intense. So affects the psyche in a big way. Well, what's been alive for you since we last connected? Trying to remember, it was a bit ago.
Yeah, I think the way our conversations have run, I think the first one was not too long before all the COVID. So I feel like we have like I was going to listen to all of the conversations before, and then for whatever reason, I couldn't bear to listen to myself.
Couldn't do it.
I couldn't do it, And so, but I do remember we have one pre-COVID, and then the next two were during COVID. So, in my mind, it was going to be the structure of our talk was going to be this sort of full circle, because it feels very post-COVID now in New York City. So, but in a way, I think then it's better that I didn't listen, because anything I say, if anyone ever listens to all four, it will be a kind of a, there won't be like a literary element where I was consciously crafting, the end of COVID or post
Yeah,
COVID.
yeah. Well,
So
you look post-COVID. You've got a flowery shirt. You've got fresh flowers behind you. There's looks like there's sun coming through the window, even if it's going through a haze.
yeah,
The smoke makes you look good.
oh,
It gives
that's
a nice
good.
soft
Yeah,
filter.
there you go.
Worth it.
But no, I'm doing all right. I mean, I think it's I think a lot of the things that are on your mind have been on my mind. I've been thinking a lot about consciousness, just what is the psyche, what is the mind. I think my journey through psychoanalysis was really, it was really about like trying to like look at myself as truthfully as I could, understand myself as deeply as I could. But I think with that theory of the psyche, at a certain point, you sort of hit a wall. You've exhausted all the metapsychology. You've exhausted all the theories. You've applied them as much as you can to yourself, and you come to recognize, well, there's way more here. You know, and this paradigm doesn't seem to have much to say about it. So now what? What the fuck do I do now? So there's been a
Yeah.
lot of like, continued immersion in dreams and I remember I threw Bernardo Kastrup your way. You talked to him, had a great
Yep. Thank you.
conversation.
Yeah.
I've been really interested in these thinkers about consciousness who are not materialists. So him and this guy Ian McGilchrist and Donald Hoffman, just a lot of interesting people who are thinking about consciousness in a way that is non-physicalist, and so that's been a real focus of I guess my intellectual spiritual journey these last months.
Yeah. Well, what did you take? I don't know if you remember, but what do you take away from Bernardo's sort of world view or sorry, cosmic view? It's because it's thick, but it's
Yeah.
not in a way. And that was definitely a really fascinating podcast for me, but also it was tough because I'm just trying to like track it and unpack it, but you can't. It's like I didn't want to oversimplify it in my own mind, but I'm also just trying to like, okay, but what do you mean by it's mental? The world is wholly mental. And I think for most of us, we just say, well, it means it's in your mind, but I'm not sure that's exactly what he means.
Yeah. I mean, I think the simplest way to say it is we're all parts of universal mind, and reality is fundamentally consciousness. And as parts of universal mind, we appear as separate to one another, but ultimately we're not separate. But we do live in this world, and it's a world of space and time. And even if space and time are not fundamental, they appear so to us. And so we have to find our way as these little dissociated segments of universal mind to survive and find meaning and have good lives. And I think what if anybody doesn't know Bernardo, I think he is a person definitely worth taking a shot with, see if what he's talking about resonates. What the biggest thing for me was certainly all these kind of psychic experiences that I've had, or I know exactly what you would call them, just things that could be coincidences, but also feel like that's kind of doesn't feel like a coincidence. It's hard to make sense of those in a purely physicalist rendering of the
Yes.
world. If we're really separate beings and all we are is just our brains and our bodies, and when we die, that's it, and nothing, continues on, it just makes it a lot harder to make sense of all kinds of stuff that have happened to me and other people. And it's the kind of thing that when you're sitting around and you start talking about ghosts or psychic phenomena or dreams of friends, you just realize there's this whole world where it does seem like maybe we only get little glimpses of it here and there, but like where we are connected in ways we don't understand, and that materialist science can't really make sense of. So that's where I find his theory fascinating. It makes actual sense in a realistic way of all this stuff that can be dismissed as woo and new age and all that.
I think it's the woo in the new age is partially because it's languaged and packaged so poorly. Like, and someone like Bernardo, it's like you're describing it in concepts actually I hear all the time, but the way he describes it, it doesn't to me come off that way at all. It seems like wholly his own philosophical world and viewpoint and very, very cogent and thought out and original. But I had this realization just the other day. I was sitting out sort of sunset with my partner Radha on the front, and we're just, nothing special was happening, but it was just really beautiful out, just the light coming down the trees. And part of me was just thinking, I mean, how more obvious could it feel that how could you look at like a rainbow and just be like, yeah, it's just, yeah, it's for light refracted, and sometimes there's these colors that go in these arcs in the sky. That's what it is, This is how the universe is. To me, it's just like it's purely a matter of perception and how you wish to see it. And I don't see that as a downside. I see it as like the gifts and the signs are so numinous. They're everywhere that it's almost too obvious. We talk about, you're saying you talk to people and you hear about this and that and psi phenomena or coincidence, and it actually is everywhere. I mean, it's so absurd sometimes when you try to step back about what is this conundrum we find ourselves in. But I often like to think like, it's not why is there horror in the world and disorder. I would think, why wouldn't it be absolutely everything it could be? If I were to design a universe and I was God, it would be like I couldn't, in this boundary condition, there couldn't be more than I could think of than everything that we have to go through. And so in some ways, there's the obviousness. It's like, could you think of something grander, with humor in it, with synchronicity in it, with AI in it, with potential alien life, with the cosmos, with the earth, with the mundane, with boredom? It's weird. And I feel like it's getting weirder.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think what you're saying is right. There's so much that is going on inside of us, and it makes sense that the world would have so much going on in it. I mean, when I have a creative impulse, it's not like necessarily a warm, relaxed, it's full of, intensity and almost overwhelming intensity that, needs to find some external form. And so, yeah, I mean, I think sometimes when talking about these things like psi phenomena or, anything that could be branded as new agey, if you excise too much of the violence of reality, violence of the world, that's when it starts to feel, well, it's not taking into consideration the actual reality. And, so I think there is a way where you can see like the oneness, you can see the beauty, you can feel the awe, but you can also include like all the suffering, all the violence, all the horror that's going on all the time, and so that I think is how I try to think of these things, to not separate them out, segment them, but to kind of try to bring everything together and to then notice in myself, like, that feels like the creative process in me. Whatever created our world, if it's anything like a creative process for an artist, there's a lot of violence in there. There's a lot of like intensity that has a darker tone to it.
It is wholly a creative process, like all of this. And from the artist lens, it maybe does make more sense, like the downs and the not understanding, and then the highs and the sense of creation, something out of nothing, that is always in many ways built from so many things before you, inspirations and conversations and other works. Like, in a way, everything is derivative. That's not a bad thing. It's sort of like this blossoming flower that just never stops blossoming. And we keep seeing that sort of imagery in the psychedelic space, and I have these feelings in the psychedelic space of feeling it all, like, wow, the horror and the sense of just like law. It's like we pressed go on this operating system that is this whole universe, and it's just like there's cause and effect. It's like things happen, then this happens. And Newtonian physics exists. It's all part of it, including somehow energetically. And that's the part we perhaps, I hate saying things like quantum, but there's real spookiness there.
Yeah.
And it's real. And it's the fact that like quantum computers can be a thing. I still have a hard time accepting it that we're on the brink of that even being a thing. And like, yeah, a qubit, and it can be in two things at once or maybe multiple places. What? How do you control that? And then put data into that and spit it back out into like duality in a way. And I don't think, just not too much of a tangent, but you put quantum computing on top of AI, and I start to think like that would be the true singularity coming our way, when the power of the computing that is doing the AI gets exponentially more powerful.
Yeah. Can't wait for that.
Yeah, right? Maybe it's already happened. Yeah. I don't know. I heard, speaking of like psi phenomenon, I love these stories. They're kind of like candy, but it's fun I'm curious if you've had any you might wish to share. But a friend of mine, Dustin, who's been on the podcast, he's a big meditator, big background in Tibetan meditation. He went to the Harvard Divinity School. He's got a bit of practice, but when he was young, he said he got really into messing around with these old techniques of astral travel, just to be like, is this a thing? And I'm going to play around with it. And he says he got pretty good at it. And one thing that happened to him that really was just like kind of shook him. One night, he's very young, his girlfriend went out to hang out with her friends, and he sat at home in his apartment and started to do some astral traveling. He wanted to go see her, visit her, and so it kind of, you get like drawn to people. And he felt himself zooming through the building and zooming through like this reality, and he found himself in an apartment. I hope he's okay with me telling the story. And it had a lot of like black furniture. It was sort of like that kind of Trumpy aesthetic. It was a very striking design. It was like, this is odd. And he saw his girlfriend lying on a bed with this other guy. And he's like, what the hell? And she came home later and she burst into tears and eventually she started telling him the story. He says, time out. Was there a bunch of like a black couch and weird black furniture? She's like, yeah. And then he was more struck, I think, by the fact that he had some form of confirmation. And I find it very weird when I think about astral traveling. I think about people essentially going into spaces that it could be anywhere. But this was like in this dimensional space. I don't know how to explain that, assuming he's telling me the truth, which it felt very truthful. There's many, many instances of things like this, but that's a friend, something pretty close to home. And I think of my own synchronistic things that have happened that are confounding.
Yeah.
I have stories like that. Do you have anything like that? Have you heard of anything like that?
I mean, I think I mentioned one on one of our talks that involved you.
I didn't want to repeat it because I'm like, to me, that was amazing. But.
Yeah. That's one. I mean, the one I tell, I don't think I told this maybe I did. Stop me if I did. But, if anybody's listened to us talk before, I had cancer in 2012, 2013. And, my dad died of cancer actually, you were understudying my play, right when he died in early 2002. So, when I was getting ready I was having a biopsy. We didn't know it was cancer yet. I had a lump in my ankle, and the biopsy was the day after the 2012 presidential election. I just moved to the Upper West Side, and I had to vote, or I thought I should vote. So I just all day I putting off voting, and it's like getting to be late, and I said, okay, time to go. I had never voted at this location, had just moved to the Upper West Side. I get there, the line is out the school, around the block, hundreds and hundreds of people. And I'm like, there's no way I'm standing in this long line. I have to be up to 5:30 in the morning to get this, surgical biopsy. So I turn around to go home. And then I'm like, no, you know what? I'll just cut all these people. I really should vote. Nobody's going to notice. There's too many people. It's too chaotic. So I just walk in and I get to the big gymnasium where you find your table and, you hand over your ID and they tell you where to go. And that room is overrun. It's chaotic. Hundreds of people, more lines. The line to my table is, 50 people long. I'm like, well, I'm not waiting in this line. This is ridiculous. So I turn around to go again and I stop myself and I say, just cut everybody again. And if anybody stops you, so look, I have a biopsy in the morning and I have a lump in my ankle. I can't stand like this, in a long line. So I just cut it. Nobody stops me. I go to the table. I take out my ID. I give it to the woman. She looks at my ID. She says, Shinn, I knew a David Shinn who worked at Citibank in the 70s. Any chance you know him? And I said, that was my father.
This is New York City. Yeah.
New York City. I mean, and there's dozens of tables in this gymnasium and there's hundreds in the room and thousands around the block. And 3 times I almost didn't go vote. And, we have, a 30-second conversation about my dad. And, and then the next morning I would go have this biopsy. And shortly thereafter I'd be told, that I had cancer. And of course that could be a coincidence. But, it was, highly unlikely to be a coincidence, in terms of how I felt. I mean, it just seemed like somewhere, some bit of consciousness still connected to my father knew what I was about to go through. And there was something very comforting, very soothing about being reached by my father in a moment of extreme stress and trauma and uncertainty. but this woman who had a wonderful memory of him, and her whole face lit up when she saw the name and the smile on her face. And, so of course that could be a coincidence, but it's the kind of thing that makes me feel like, oh, maybe mind really is universal. We're all a part of it. We're all connected. And in certain moments, I think for me, the thing that's sort of maddening about this stuff is, I don't have constant access to it. I can't predict, if I have a psychic dream about a friend, my question is, well, why am I not having a psychic dream every night? Or, why are there times where I feel in a zone and then times where it's just not happening, but it's a very mysterious thing. It's a mysterious force.
Yeah.
Very few people, it seems, are able to truly harness it and control it.
Thank you for sharing that story. I hadn't heard that before. I think that's wonderful to hear. Ram Dass would call them miracle stories. He says they're cheating, but he's like, they're so fun to hear. Look, let's say you identify it as a coincidence, and I would say, so what? It's still the same thing. It's just a box we want to put it in to feel almost safer. It feels less safe to say we are far more connected, and it's uncontrollable. And sometimes you feel, maybe most of the time, very disconnected. So that's the other side of the coin. And you almost want it to be like, no, there's no meaning. I don't know how these rules work, so I don't want to even play the game, if it is a game. And another way to look at it, to me, is, well, let's say we start to discover the entanglement of particles, and we know some about this, and we start to understand that time actually it has some sort of layering effect, and we can't change it, but we can almost explain things. I would still say it's equally amazing because that's still part of this substrate of the world that we live in. That's still how it is, just like a rainbow. Yeah, we understand what's happening. I'm more struck by the fact that even happens.
Yeah.
And so the fact that coincidences, whatever you want to call them, they happen. And sometimes they're so powerful, they shake you out like that. I have stories like that where it gives, it's like a wink, or it gives more meaning. It's a showing of depth. Like, imagine if we never had them. It's hard to imagine that. Like, there was never coincidences. It almost would be too dark and bland, like our existence. Like, we need a certain level of magic, because it is hard to be here. And I feel like we're given often just the bare minimum, just a tiny bit over the absolute minimum of what we require to give you a helping hand, but no more.
Yeah. I mean, look, it could also be reminders that, there's way more than we understand about reality. And, I mean, why would we be the ones to know reality? If people 50 years ago didn't know all of reality. Right. They didn't know it 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. Of course, we don't know it either. But these little moments break through. And if you're able to receive them, you can realize, okay, there's way more than I understand. And for that to be a soothing, comforting, I mean, it can also be obviously destabilizing, but in a good way, ideally, that, to know that there's way more to know and there's so much we don't know. And that can be frightening, but it can also be, very inspiring and to me, very soothing.
Well, we were talking on text about sort of another color of this, which is people who maybe take advantage of it consciously, and those who take advantage of it unconsciously. They get caught up in their stories, and then they become the identity of whatever it is. A lot of us do this in, I think, very mundane ways. It's just sort of our public-facing identity becomes a story that we embody, and then decades go by, and you're just it. And at the same time, you're like, I actually remember constructing parts of this. Like, I met this guy, I thought he had this cool affect, and now I can't stop doing that, or whatever it is. And it's like our psychology becomes a dream that we construct. But some people, it is more nefarious. Like, they know they can take advantage of people because it actually doesn't take much to hoodwink people.
Yeah.
We're just lucky that most people don't do that. Really, most people just don't. They're fairly good people. But there are some people who are like, this is so easy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I every once in a while in my meditations, I will I'll reach maybe 1 second where I'm aware, I'm conscious, but I feel like I don't know who I am for about 1 second.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have no identity, and I find it a very frightening experience. Like it's a panic. It's almost a panic. Like I've disappeared, but I still exist. And then I
Yeah.
come back into my body and my identity, and I'm like, oh, okay. I'm Christopher Shinn. I'm a playwright. And like, here's where I live. Here's my partner here. Yeah. But I feel like the goal will be to sustain that period of not knowing who I am and just being pure consciousness. Build it from 1 second to 5 seconds or 10. Ultimately maybe even longer, because it does. I think the benefit of it is even parts of you that feel very feel very real. In some way, they were constructed. In some ways,
Oh,
they aren't
totally.
they aren't real. And that to me feels like the really crucial thing to reach. I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm not a sociopath. I'd be pretty shocked to find out I
Yeah,
was
I
a
hope not. I don't
sociopath.
think you are.
But I feel like I wouldn't be shocked to realize even the parts of me that feel the most authentic have something that is highly constructed. And not that there's anything wrong with constructing parts of your identity either, but um, I would want to know that. I mean, I want to understand who I am as much as possible outside of the ways I've constructed an identity to help me navigate the world. Um, I mean, that's one area. I don't know how much we'll want to talk about this, but because it's all still pretty abstract for me. But I've been thinking again. I've been wondering: is it time to experiment with psychedelics again? And I've been more, I've been more
That's what I'm
curious.
thinking while you're talking. I'm just like, oh yeah, that's like take some ketamine or
It's funny. I have a secret. I'm off all social media. I don't have any, so except LinkedIn, if you consider that social media. But I'm not on any Instagram or Twitter or anything. But I do have a secret. I have a little Instagram account where when my partner and I have a nice meal, I like record the meals there, so I would look back and remember these meals.
it's old school Instagram.
Yeah.
That's what
So
it used to be. It's like I'm having lunch, or
yeah,
that's what Twitter
exactly.
used to be. Yeah.
So it's always just pictures of food, but I don't know why they have some insight nevertheless into your psyche. And so I got these ads for a company that does at home ketamine therapy, and I would never do it that way, like a big corporate, a thing. And I found the way they advertise themselves, I found it pretty offensive. I was like,
Yeah.
this just is not. But I noted my own intense curiosity about it, and and I know people who've been doing all kinds of different therapies and ayahuasca and psilocybin, and I question them about it, and what I always find is that whoever they describe as like the guide or the person who's structuring it, I am I just like, oh, I don't want that person. Like that doesn't sound good to me. That doesn't sound right. Like I know that for me, like the thing that would get me to do it would be meeting a person that I really trusted, that I felt like this person is like
Rada.
truly,
Rada should do it with you
yeah,
remotely. Yeah, and I would if you do ketamine because I feel like you'll be fine. I mean, and she's done some of that. You just need to source the medicine within your state. But we have a friend in New York who did that legally. He found it pretty cheap. And anyway, that's one option. I might be in New York playing in August. I mean, I don't know. You probably don't want to do it in a public space like that for the first time, but I think you want to be in comfort of your own home. Really drop in.
yeah,
Yeah, well, I would recommend her. But I honestly think you would find it fascinating because it's so much about your psyche and just uncovering layer after layer after layer. Did I tell you I did a darkness retreat in
I
January?
listened to your
Oh,
episode
okay. So
about it.
that you also would be interested in that because that's
Yeah,
only about psych. I mean, there's nothing left but your identity and psychology, and talk about things being unveiled by darkness.
yeah,
But I want to go back to what you were saying about a hearing in there about like for myself, I'm thinking about goals and how as I get older, all they're bringing me is anxiety and distress. And I'm curious, coming out of the pandemic and as a writer, I'm going to throw in the layer of like the writer strike and AI. and what you and playwriting
Yeah.
and it in the way that where that sits in the culture. Where are you at in career drive goals?
I mean, it's a really good question. I mean, so the writer, as of now, we'll see what happens when this posts. But there's a writer's strike happening. So all screenwriting work is stopped. I have a TV show we'd be ready to go out with that I really like. That means a lot to me. It's written from an authentic place in me. Um, we'll see if that gets going once
But
the
it's
strike ends.
written, so you have to wait until the strike is over to sell to pitch it and stuff. Or
Yeah, because it would be strike breaking to try to get a show set up.
oh, I
Also, not
see.
it's also just a crazy time in general. I mean, these companies have created too much content, and I think
Yeah,
anybody who has scrolled through their various streaming services, you don't have to work hard to explain that to them. It's just an overwhelming experience of just endless content. So I think there's probably a correction that needs to happen as well. Even apart from the strike, these companies need to figure out, a different way of doing business. But
but what do you think that correction would be? Would it be less content, or is it like more thoughtful, or more curated, or is it the way it's presented?
I think there'll have to be less content. And maybe there'd be some new ways of integrating advertising to these streaming services that they're not just making money from their subscriptions. That'd be my guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, what has not returned? I have an idea for a play. I've been a playwright 25 years. Certainly my passion. Um, the part of me that writes a play, it's a very mysterious part of me. It doesn't feel super tied to my identity. If it feels like it's some kind of a force that also that is both within me and outside of me.
Yeah.
But it's a very particular thing. It's a very specific feeling, and I just haven't had that feeling. So
Mm.
I've written like a first scene of a play, and I look at it and I'm like, that's not me. Like, that's not me,
Hmm.
the writer me. Like that's not good writing because the part of me that really writes is not writing it. And I don't know when that's going to come back. I have a retreat, I have a residency coming up in December, and maybe I just need to go somewhere in the woods or something. But I feel kind of what I think happened. I never really the diamond, the kind of Jungian diamond. Like I don't know, it never really resonated with me till recently. And recently I've kind of thought, my diamond wrote all these plays, and then when theater got harder to do, just like you know the kind of business model of theaters in the United States just really is not a good one. And so it was just getting harder to do it. I mean, not that I ever stopped doing it, it just was harder. And then COVID came, and that really did stop the theater. I think my diamond was like, you know, you exist to write plays. Like, what are you doing? Why are you pursuing screenwriting? Why are you doing these other things? That's not what you're meant to do. And so I think my diamond was like, fuck you. Like, I'm out of here. Like, you have not honored me, and I'm not coming back. And so, like, that creative part of me, I think it really, it feels like it's gone, and I don't know when it's coming back. And it concerns me and saddens me. But I've been trying to feed it in these other ways. I've kind of had the idea that, like, well, okay, I don't control the theater. I don't control the economics of the theater in the United States. I don't control critics. I don't control, the PR machine that, hypes you when you're on the way up and then, neglects you when, it's gotten used to you. So I think a lot of my readings into consciousness and my kind of intellectual and spiritual explorations are about trying to like bring my diamond back, like come back. There's like interesting stuff going on. It may not be a play, but maybe it'll interest you. And I feel like it's working a little. Like I feel like there's a little space kind of starting to open up. But I would love to feel that feeling again of like fully locked in to that writer self, because I feel like that like that was my unique gift. It was to write these plays that I think were really deep and were entertaining, and we're finding ways to actually represent you know the world that we live in.
Do you think some of
So
that was like taking a break in a way from COVID? Like in some ways, it's about practice. there's a rep, getting off the horse in a way.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
comedians when they get off the stage. It's like, man, I gotta like it is what it is. I gotta start working back. At the
Yeah.
clubs.
Yeah. I mean, maybe a part of it is discipline is like, okay, if I could discipline myself with that, invite some of that energy back in. I mean, I'm working on a screenplay kind of passion project with a friend, not something that we would like try to sell to you know, somebody in Hollywood, but something we I think would make. And that has been incredibly meaningful and like felt very deep and very inspiring. Now, like I don't feel the same as I do about a play because I think it relies on somebody else's energy. It's the two of us together doing it.
Right.
So that doesn't make it any less special. It just isn't the same. It's a different kind of
Right.
experience. So like it's also possible that like my creativity will just shift, and maybe like I'll find these new forms, like working with people in new ways, doing new things. I don't know, but yeah, it's definitely been a period of kind of bewildering absence of that thing that for 20 years felt like it was always there. Like it was a part of my psyche. It was always there. It was always ready to go. And if I would just make the space for it, it would show up. And it
Yeah,
just yeah.
that was my question was going to be,
Yeah.
what does it mean for you to make the space for it? What do
Well,
you
I
mean by
used to
that?
just I used to just do
Sit down.
yeah, I would meditate or I would sit down, and it
You'd
would
have
count,
to
or I'd be
show up
walking
to
around.
start. Just like I'm gonna just start writing stuff, see what comes out.
Yeah, I'd be walking around. Maybe I'd feel, I'd hear some dialogue, see, have some kind of glimpse of a moment or something. And these little fragments of dialogue, these little glimpses of people on a stage, it would just start to kind of build in my psyche. And when enough had built up, I would sit down, and it would just start. It would just
Hmm.
come. And yeah, it doesn't happen anymore. It hasn't happened for about 5 years.
Well, I'm just wondering what part of that is almost passive, and what part of it is active on your part. I'm interested in this because I have these ideas and worries, and I also wonder when we get in ruts creatively, which isn't that we're not producing. It's more like, but you keep doing what you do as opposed to being open to a shift like you're talking about. It's like, what if it's been a while? Maybe it's been 20 years. It's like maybe there's a new thing I'm not even giving space for to come through, to try other things, and maybe that's what a lot of the struggle is. And so I'm just curious, the active versus passive roles you see for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it used to be the outside interest fed like my writing. So like
Yeah.
psychoanalysis in my 20s and 30s, that was like a way of
Yeah.
like deepening my playwriting. Then I really went deep with this thinker Rene Girard for about a decade. I read everything Girard wrote. An incredible writer on violence and scapegoating and mimesis, the ways that we copy one another, ways we take our identities from each other, and the lack of actual inner substance to us. Actually, there's you were kind enough to share your new album. I guess it doesn't come out for a few months, right?
Well, the first single's out, and another one's coming out. But yeah, it comes out August 18th. The music for the deck of the Titanic.
Yeah, I loved
Yeah.
it. And but there's
Thank
a
you.
there's one of
Thank
the
you.
songs. I don't know if this is
We can
giving
talk
anything
about any of the songs. I
away.
mean, yeah.
Well, there's like somebody I don't know the person, so I don't know if they're a stand-up comic or
Talking,
some kind.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
It's Duncan Trussell, who's been on the pod. He's hilarious, and people. Yes, there's a song with Duncan,
he's
and
great.
he's a comedian, and he's unique.
Well, he has his theory of desire is like Rene Girard's theory. He has an amazing riff on like trying to like create more sexual excitement for yourself, and like, but actually the whole structure of desire is that you're never satisfied. You have to keep adding,
That is the
crazy.
best part of it. Yeah.
So good. And then now my 40s, like all these different thinkers on consciousness. So like I like I'm not saying I'm special, but when I talk to people in showbiz, it's rare that I meet somebody who has like become a specialist in other areas of thought the way I did. I mean, I basically took a decade, in those first two realms, and I'm sure my interest in consciousness will take me through another decade. Like I really learned, like I really learned, I really did it at a
Yeah.
level of a specialist, and so I think that is maybe there's something in me, that like if that part of me is growing stronger, I don't know, maybe something will recede creatively. If part of what I loved about being an artist was just the freedom to do whatever I wanted, and to see that it's harder to do whatever you wanted now. Like maybe, it's like, well, I can't do
Mm,
what I used to do.
mm,
Like maybe that's why I don't want to do it. It's harder to do it, the way I used to do it. So I don't know. I may be a pretty passive person in a certain way. Like obviously I'm assertive. Like I follow interests and passions, in a a really rigorous way. But I don't always have a sense that I can really control that much, like in a pragmatic way. Like I kind of
sure.
think like I don't know, like
You
what's going to
can't
happen
do
in my
any of
career,
yeah.
like that kind of stuff. I don't have that kind of like I'm gonna
But
write a play and get
did
it
you and
produced. And,
have you let some of that go, or has that been just sort of that's where you feel like you're at?
I mean, I think I've probably become more. Passive is a weird word. I don't want to use the word passive because it feels
More
like
like, I mean,
equanimous, maybe like just sort of like
mm,
okay, like
yeah,
you know things are what they are. They unfold the way they unfold, and it's not in
yeah,
my power. Beyond the margins, it's not much in my power.
yeah, yeah. Well, I can sense that a lot. So also when you talked about this other piece that you're excited about, it's more collaborative, and I definitely sense that too. Like when you're writing, it's you're yourself, and I often work alone, but I'm really feeling that desire to work with other people, and I've been working on a documentary for about 2 years that's moving more into okay, it's actually turning into something versus just a bunch of random footage. And the hardest thing about it is how collaborative it is. There's many people doing things I can't do, and I don't even have expertise really in, and it was very unsettling for me. But I'm also recognizing that part of myself that's actually been yearning for working with others, and especially musicians. I
Hmm.
was thinking about my days in New York and having bands that were total shit shows in my 20s, and I actually moved away from that because of how difficult it was. That's why I started doing the solo thing. But now I'm like, I'm a little lonely in that regard. I think you start to feel like you're repeating yourself. So maybe in your process, you talk about some kind of well felt like it dried a bit, but maybe it's doing that for a reason. Also, it's propelling you into collaboration
Yeah,
in zones
maybe.
that, I mean, it is in
Yeah,
some ways. And I'm hearing you say it's a bit exciting.
yeah, it is very exciting. I mean, yeah. Look, part of theater is collaboration. So that
Big time.
desire to
Yeah.
work with people was always there. And when I did a play of mine last fall in England in Chichester in the south of England. And when I was back in a room working with people, I was so happy. I was like, this is what I'm meant to do.
Yeah.
So I've always that level of connection has always been there, but never as a writer. So that's a new thing to be writing a script with somebody. So I don't know, maybe there's
Yeah.
some
Who
desire to
knows?
connect
Yeah.
with people. Bringing something that was the most private and intimate part of me, bringing that part into relationship with somebody. That is really new.
Feels pretty edgy,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah, in a good way. It's there's vulnerability there, and even in our earlier discussions today about sort of your curiosities around consciousness, I'm guessing that's a little bit of an uncomfortable space for you. Like you have spent a long time looking for definitions and explanations and models, and there's a lot of really deep ones out there. But as you said, none of them is the grand solution, right? and
Yeah.
and you play in the world of art anyway, which is that's all it is. It's like Eric Davis had that wonderful quote about like dancing around the mystery with no edge, or something like that. And I feel like that's what art is. It's only metaphor, and that's the point of it. It's meant to cross dimensions we can't explain. And that is actually your bread and butter in a lot of, like, you're using what's cool about it too is you're using words which are so specific and using them in structures in ways the way you put it together, it's evoking feeling, which is then
Yeah.
now that's the thing that we go across the boundary with. I think it's cool.
Yeah.
So I think it's a
Right.
new frontier for you.
I hope so. That was really nicely said.
Yeah.
What
Yeah, this
is
could be
the what
good.
what elements of the documentary, like, are you talking about technical things you don't know how to do, or you mean there's like other
Kind of
elements?
all of it.
Yeah.
Like, I majored in film in college, but that doesn't mean you really know anything. I think I was just super naive. I like projects, and my friend Mark and I were filming things for East Forest in general, and then next thing you know, I was like, oh, well, this could be a documentary. And he's like, that seems like a big deal. I was like, nah, no big deal. We'll just keep filming, and then we'll film this other thing. And it just kept growing, and it kept getting confusing and beyond my capabilities. So then you have to bring on like story consultants, or I need like producer help or an editor. That was a huge deal. We just got an editor, but just learning like, how do you pick an editor? Like looking at other people's work that is different scripts and directors, and trying to figure out, well, what's the editor in here?
Yeah.
I learned a lot through that, and you start to see things, and so that it's just learning things I haven't done before. And I've done albums, but they're largely by myself. There's people you bring on, or people play with you sometimes, but I felt like I was in charge of the project. And this one, I'm like, I need help. Like it's also way bigger than. I had a hard time just wrapping my head around the scope of all the material, and then trying to like put it together. Like, we had like 200 hours of footage, probably at
Oh
least,
wow.
and there'll probably be some more. And it's difficult to just sort of conceptualize that mentally.
Yeah, that's a huge amount of footage. What
I
can you say
know.
what it's about, or you don't want to?
Oh, sure, yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's about music primarily as a role in transformation and change, but music, ceremony, and psychedelics are sort of the three pillars that I'm playing around with. So it's following my process and story. There's like a narrative to it where I'm trying to figure out how to do that. This big tour where people are potentially taking psychedelics at scale, and does it matter? Is this safe? All the things that come along with that. So I'm meeting with people and having discussions, but the idea is more that that's just the backbone for a story, so that people are hopefully seeing themselves somewhere in the various characters and people that are coming through this project, where they think like, well, actually, okay, that might be interesting. I might want to try that, or I have inspiration that this thing might be a modality I might look into. I mean, the message of it, it's kind of an anti-message in a way. And it doesn't end as being like, change your light bulbs and that'll solve everything. It's more, well, you have to choose, and it is up to you. But that's sort of like Duncan said in that song, like, that's the good news. Like, it's up to you. But maybe it's not super hard if you're feeling like most people are working from the outside in, waiting for the next president or the next law or the next invention, or AI will fix it, or whatever it is. And it's like, that may be part of it, but at the end of the day, it's always coming from an individual at a time. All of us just make decisions and changes, inspiration, and things are made, collective agreements. And so in that way, we've abdicated so much of our energy and responsibility to external powers in the last few decades, particularly in the last 15 years, largely through, I think, social media and the iPhone and the proliferation of the internet. And it's sort of getting that back again, especially for the generations and the people who are just like completely, like, we're just asleep.
Yeah.
Completely asleep. You talk about all the content, it's just like putting us to sleep. And so ironically, I'm using that same kind of content to but I recognize that's where most people are right now. Like, I was working on a book, and I kind of put it on the shelf, pun intended, because I'm like, not many people are reading as much.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's
that's what it's
really
about.
interesting. Yeah. So you were talking, I hadn't thought, like, my experience with psychedelics in my 20s, I'd read tons of novels, and, I'd have been exposed to really complex thinkers about the psyche. And what's happening? You're taking these drugs and you've never read a book. Like, yeah, I don't know, because I can't know that, but it's a really interesting thing to imagine this generation that really was, you know, just the screens were everywhere.
Yeah.
Didn't develop the kind of inwardness that we may have because we had more exposure to poetry
Yeah,
and,
completely different. Completely different. I mean, we just had a whole president who probably never read a book, probably. I
yeah,
mean, he happens to be of a very different generation, but nonetheless, it's like, I think we're in a grand experiment of change that's happening so fast that it's very difficult for us to know what kind of influence that's having, especially, like you said, on kids growing up who are now in their 20s that have never known anything else. Just the constant information age coming their way. It's wild.
Yeah.
It's wild stuff. Well, aside from that, I mean, is there anything else that's been alive with you subject-wise, either in work that you're working on or something you're worried about? Or is there anything else when you were listening to that record that you liked?
Yeah,
I'll take praise.
I thought the title was a little funny. I'm curious why you called it that. This is like, I'm about to praise you, but I'm going to start the praise with like
I love it.
destabilizing
And I'm trying to
question.
remember how did that come about. Sometimes like those phrases get in my head and I start playing around with them like, oh, this might be the title for a record, and then they never go away, and then it's sort of like the identity becomes. I don't remember how it came about. I just remember why I liked it though, because I'm struggling with a lot of feelings of grief and worry and despair, and also at times hope and change, and sort of that ineffable, like when we were sitting outside together, my partner, and it's like, but there's this perfection at the same time amidst the horror. And I just thought about, it just feels like something is dying and there's a midwifing process going on. Or maybe it's not happening very well, but that's really what to me is happening on a societal level. And if we took that lens, maybe it'd be a little more about letting things go as opposed to continuing to prop up on life support all these different systems that just aren't necessarily working. And we're trying to get ahead of it being disastrous in a way. And I was very disappointed in many ways by COVID and our response to it. And I was still kind of shocked and trying to make sense of all that. So I think as me just trying to make sense of the kind of tension we're in. And so I thought about the musicians who played the music while I was singing. And if that's true, which I hear that it was, I find that very beautiful and honorable and incredibly brave. So in some ways, I feel sometimes like that's not to pat myself on the back. I'm doing that on some level. Like maybe I'm trying to justify the fact that I'm an artist in an era when there's so much going on. Like, should I be out there just building homes for people, or does my music matter? Perhaps it's my own justification to say like, well, it's important to sing to the brethren when we're dying. It's like hospice in a way, and so that's perhaps where it came from.
Yeah. I mean, what I thought was interesting about the title was, I think of the Titanic, sinking, it sunk pretty fast, right? At least, I'm going on James Cameron's cinematic rendering.
Yeah.
So, like, I think of the music that I imagine was played. I imagine it being kind of soothing and maybe a little sentimental. And sort of wistful, and I imagine the songs being short, like, oh, we're gonna.
Yeah, they didn't have a lot of time. Let's get the set done. Yeah.
And I found your album. I mean, there's different textures to it, but there's definitely a plaintive energy throughout much of it, I would say. So a lot of it felt very meditative, very plaintive, very mournful. And so the way I made your title work for me was I was like, this is as if the Titanic took like 2 months to sink, and nobody could rescue them either. So it was just like, you're on the Titanic.
Oh, that's far worse. Yeah,
it's just 2 months, and you have time to like process and think and like go into mournful and meditative states. So I think my favorite side. I only listened to it a couple times, so I'm no expert.
Sure.
on it,
Thank you for listening to it at all. I appreciate that. Yeah.
But I think this song is called Clay Steps. Is that a song?
Yeah, instrumental song. Yeah.
So starting there, and then for a few songs, like to me, that was like the heart of the album, where I felt it was just it was very, very deep, and I've connected to very deep currents in myself, and that, no pun intended, with deep currents in the Titanic. But that was cool. I thought that was really, really beautiful. But yeah, I found it like a very expansive and not a sentimental album. Not like, let's be wistful, let's comfort and soothe everybody as we're going down, but like, let's actually like process and.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I'm trying to process all these things going on. It's just trying to keep up with the currents of our time. But it's so much. It is so much. As we're saying this, you've got the burning skies out your window. And, And yet,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
I mean, like I often think about how bad the world is, and I've noticed like it used to be. I feel like when there was a mass shooting, like 10 people would text me, and now I feel like I'm lucky if one friend texts me. Like I
yeah,
feel like we have normalized pretty much everything,
yeah,
and and it's a strange feeling. It's strange to be less outraged. It's strange to be less sad about things. But I don't know that that's a bad thing. I don't know that that means we become desensitized. It may just mean like we understand that our culture is incapable of change on a certain level, at least right now. And maybe people are devoting themselves to other kinds of deep pursuits rather than political activism and outrage. And I'm not saying whether that's good or bad. I don't know,
hmm
but I'm trying to look at it in a way that isn't purely that we're all becoming detached and apathetic, and but that I have a friend, a trans friend who basically ignores politics. Just feels like she is just like it's too upsetting, and she doesn't want to talk about it. And I just think that makes total sense. I'm not
hmm
saying it's right or wrong, good or bad. It just makes sense that somebody would be like, I don't want to think about this stuff. Like, I want to have a life that is, and that's something that I think 5 or 10 years ago, I've been like, no, that's a horrible thing. We need to look at these things. We need to, we need to face them. We can't, look away. I don't know what it says that now I'm not sure. Maybe it is okay to say, you know what, I'm going to meditate for 4 hours today, and I'm not going to read about, whatever suffering is on the front page today.
yeah. It might be a good place to leave it. It's like it's also trusting process, trusting your intuition, and recognizing we don't have to be on full tilt all the time. It's our economy of scale often feels like one of our major sicknesses, and it's just to say that like, oh, it's irrelevant or maybe even harmful if I'm just petting a cat in a way because there's so much happening, and in my heart I feel that that does matter, and that goes back to the whole like, if everything's just what it is on the face value, if a rainbow is just a refraction of light, it's like then that's what it is. But it's like then that's just what petting a cat is. But I actually feel like there's some sort of cosmic significance to that too. It's something about love and opening yourself and calming yourself. Somehow it actually matters, even if no one sees it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
I can't explain it, but I'm sticking to it. Well, it's good to talk, my friend. And
Yeah,
good to see you. Uh,
yeah. First
yeah,
time. It's
yeah,
really nice to see you. It's different. It's different. I feel like the last times we talked, I think probably like closed my eyes and like
uh
went
huh,
into a meditative zone, just like listening to your voice. And this time, like I couldn't do that. Obviously, I'm on camera, so I'm
yeah,
trying to like But I was looking at you the whole time. It felt. I definitely felt like we're having a real conversation, a
yeah,
real space.
yeah. It makes it easier.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I look forward to doing it again. And one of these days, we'll send you a little medal. You can be in the special club of people who've been on the
Yeah.
show.
What? Who's the most? Who's number one?
You're up there.
Rada must be.
Rada's number one for
Yeah.
sure. It's like when you get to six, maybe we'll send you like a gold medal. You can wear it
Okay.
around. Yeah, or wear it just when you're on.
Just when I'm on. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think you'd wear it otherwise. Cool, man. And
Right.
anything people can check out or anything like that?
I don't think I have anything. No, nothing imminent. You're going to be in New York. You said in August.
Yeah, we're trying. There might be a show. I mean, any day we'll see if we can pull the trigger on it.
All
We've been
right.
trying. It's hard, but
Yeah.
I think so. I'm coming through there. Yeah, to see Sigur Rós play at the Beacon Theater, which was a show I saw of them in 2005 that completely changed my life.
Oh
And
wow.
so it's sort of coming full circle, and it's the
Yeah.
end. It's the end of their tour, this world tour with an orchestra. So I'm pretty excited about that. But
All right.
yeah,
Well,
so that'd be
if
mid August.
if you have time, maybe we'll get to see each other.
Would love to. All right, you're living on like Murray Hill or something
No,
now,
I'm
or?
in Crown Heights, Brooklyn now.
Oh, okay. All
Yeah.
right. Sorry, I didn't mean to
I'm out of
trash
Murray
Murray
Hill.
Hill.
No,
Okay.
we have we'll edit that out that I lived in Murray Hill.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
I have no shame that I lived in Murray Hill. I'm quite proud of it actually.
It's not a very I didn't find it to be convenient because it's actually kind of like east, and you have to
It's
walk
east.
over
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah. Well, I moved there. You know,
Quiet.
I moved there because like I had been given a terminal diagnosis and I needed to be close to
Right.
the hospital. So like that was
Yeah.
the whole reason I moved there. I was like, well, I'm gonna die,
Wow.
and like I better be close to the hospital. And so like when I picked up that apartment, I was like, all right. I looked at the view and I was like, well, this could be what I'm looking at when I die. So that was like, so that was moving to Murray Hill, and I'm still alive, and I moved to Brooklyn now. So that's in the past.
Well, I'm glad we're both still here.
Yeah.
Hopefully more. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, great to talk.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming on the show. I love it. Always love talking. This music that you're hearing is from the other Christopher Willits, our other dear friend. He's been on the pod before if you want to go back in time. These are evergreen podcasts, so you can listen to anything in the catalog at any time. But Christopher did a remix of the last song on the Burren album called Slan. And this is his remix. I encourage you to go over to Spotify or Apple or wherever you listen to music and really listen to it in full form. It's a beautiful rework of the Slan song from the Burren album. I got to see Peter Broderick, incidentally, when we were in Ireland, and that was lovely. And we're both just got some rehearsal space in August so that we can get together and put together this joint live improvised ceremony style show. It's going to be beautifully acoustic, and we're going to go deep together. But until then, I want you all just please keep walking that walk. Don't take any shit, but if you do it with grace.